This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. This might come as a surprise to many of you, but it's only Wednesday. There's plenty more fun to be had this week. Here's what we got for y'all. North Korea threw a parade with some big surprises. We used open source reporting to tell you what newly displayed weapons systems could mean for international diplomacy. Plus, early voting got off to a rough start in some states this week. We'll tell you more about voting stories from polling places across the US. But first, here's what you need to know right now. Another day of questioning on Capitol Hill as Judge Amy Coney Barrett kept the same tone during her confirmation hearings.
Well, as I said yesterday, what I can say is that I have certainly no agenda. I'm not on a mission. And I think that I really can't say anything more than I'm not going to answer hypotheticals. As I've said a number of times, I can't express a view, yes or no, A+ or F.
Senate Democrats have continued to press Barrett on her views on healthcare, with Senator Amy Klobuchar pointing to Barrett authoring an article critical of the Affordable Care Act before the president nominated her.
So my question is simply, were you aware of President Trump's opposition to the Affordable Care Act during that time?
And again, I want to stress, I have no animus to or agenda for the Affordable Care Act. So to the extent you're suggesting this was like an open letter to President Trump, it was not.
Meanwhile, Republicans on the committee focused on Barrett's Christian faith.
This is the first time in American history that we've nominated a woman who's unashamedly pro-life and embraces her faith without apology.
Thursday, the Senate Judiciary Committee will have a chance to hear from people who know Barrett. Those names have not yet been released. Some senators have been joining the hearings virtually due to the pandemic, but senators will be required to be in the room in order to vote on Barrett's nomination, with that first vote expected Thursday, likely along party lines. Once approved by the committee, Barrett's nomination will go to the full Senate for a final vote.
And lift off. Kate Rubin, Sergei Ryzhikov, and Sergei Kuznetsov now on their way to the International Space Station.
American astronaut Kate Rubins took off from Kazakhstan earlier today in what is the last contracted flight on a Russian spaceship for U.S. astronauts, marking a transition to U.S. providers like SpaceX. The crew arrived safely a few hours after takeoff. The launch comes just a few weeks before the anniversary of the first crew arriving to the ISS 20 years ago. That's 2 decades of human presence in space. Since then, the US has had 149 different people visit the ISS. This is Rubin's second trip to the International Space Station. Stop us if you've heard this one before, but the Census Bureau says it will officially end the 2020 count early, this time with an October 15th deadline. The Supreme Court sided with the Trump administration Tuesday, overturning a lower court ruling that ordered the work to continue until October 31st. It's been dizzying just trying to keep up with the back and forth on the census. The deadline was originally set for August, but shifted to October due to the pandemic. Then it abruptly changed to September 30th before being switched back to October, and now Thursday. Census data is used to determine congressional seats and federal funding for states. The Trump administration argues it needs to wrap up the counting phase to meet key deadlines. But there could be another motive at play. See, if the Commerce Secretary presents the new state count to the White House by December 31st, President Trump would then control the implementation process regardless of whether he wins re-election. That could give him a chance to make sure the count to form new U.S. House seats excludes undocumented immigrants, who typically are accounted for in the census. The Constitution requires the whole number of persons in each state to be counted, but Trump sent a memo earlier this year hoping to change that. The move sparked a separate legal fight that has made its way to the Supreme Court. Oral arguments in that case are scheduled to be heard Friday. Parades during a pandemic are likely ill-advised. If you think about it, it's just a really good way for people to get together and effectively spread a very dangerous virus for which there's no vaccine yet. But current circumstances didn't stop the North Korean military from having a parade to mark the anniversary of the founding of the Korean Workers' Party. And this one featured a surprise: new missile capabilities that we didn't know about. As a part of our award-winning Newsy Bellingcat series, Newsy's Sasha Ingber uses open source intelligence to study some of the new weapons and tell us what we can glean from that display.
North Korea is forging ahead with its weapons development, despite international sanctions. A nighttime military parade celebrating 75 years of the ruling Workers' Party gives us an inside look at the nation's expanding arsenal. And now included in that arsenal is what analysts are calling the world's largest mobile intercontinental ballistic missile. A new danger from Pyongyang.
The tractor system that they're carrying it on. This had 11 axles. That's massive.
Open source analysis shows it's 2 axles more than the 9-axle transport used to carry the HS-15, what used to be North Korea's largest known intercontinental ballistic missile.
The warhead configuration did suggest that this thing may have a MIRV capability, which would be able to rain down a variety of different missiles onto a target.
While analysts aren't sure if this new missile is functional, its ability to carry multiple nuclear warheads poses challenges to U.S. defenses.
They already had the ability to target cities throughout the United States, but the real advantage of having so many warheads is that the U.S. only has about 40 missile defense interceptors, so if they can put 3 or 4 warheads on every missile, then they'll overwhelm us, and we just don't have enough.
The parade also showcased a new iteration of a submarine-launched ballistic missile. Labeled Pugukseong-4, the missile has cosmetic differences from its predecessor, tested last October. Analysts say it might be used on land, which would allow it to be deployed more quickly, but the new version has yet to be tested.
So this is the first time we've ever seen it, and it is really, really big, which means it can fly probably a lot further than we think.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un was flanked by the heads of the strategic and conventional forces. And in a speech, he denied his country has coronavirus cases, while a white face mask sat on a lectern before him. At times on the verge of tears, Kim signaled to the U.S. that a return to strategic patience means North Korea will continue developing its arsenal.
One of the things that was very interesting about this parade is we're scratching our heads trying to figure out, where did they get the resources here? It shows that our sanctions have been absolutely worthless.
Chinese and Russian entities have helped North Korea over the years, but the tractors for the large missiles shown off during the parade don't match their known transports, suggesting that tractors may be made indigenously in North Korea. The tires and parts of the cab also resemble tractors the country has used in the past. The parade raises many questions, including whether its revelations will change the U.S. defense posture. A Defense Department spokesperson told Newsy its analysis was ongoing and that it's consulting with allies in the region.
Welcome back stateside after this upcoming ad break to tell you what's got folks chirping online. Question: why would Biden and Trump spend an evening talking over each other when they can just field questions from voters? Here's what's trending. Both the president and former VP are taking their talents to town halls on the same night at the same time after the Commission on Presidential Debates scrapped round 2. As a reminder, the commission wanted to go virtual with the second presidential debate because of COVID-19 concerns. The president had just tested positive for coronavirus, and the commission's production staff objected to working that debate. President Trump said a virtual debate was a waste of time and declined to participate. I would say that 2 town halls on the same night at the same time is a little absurd, but you saw the first debate. Debate number 2's would-be moderator Steve Scully might be the only winner here. Both town halls will take place Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Biden's will be 90 minutes on ABC and Trump's will be 60 minutes on NBC. A New York Times bestseller that became an iconic text about poverty and addiction in Appalachia is headed for a star-studded film release, with its first trailer dropping today.
You got to decide, you want to be somebody or not.
Hillbilly Elegy stars Glenn Close and Amy Adams, with Ron Howard directing, in what looks like a pretty dramatic film based on a true story, specifically the life story of author J.D. Vance, who became something of a white working-class whisperer when his book of the same name dropped in 2016. And because this is a Netflix film, we don't have to wonder about whether it will be in theaters. Hillbilly Elegy is coming to the small screen November 24th. Now look, if we covered every wild tweet from the president, that would be like the entire show every night, and I would lose my damn mind. But Donald Trump's boost of an off-the-wall and clearly false conspiracy theory this week is even more bizarre social media behavior than what we've come to expect. Tuesday on Twitter, the president repeatedly shared a debunked right-wing theory that SEAL Team 6, the team that pulled off the raid killing Osama bin Laden, had actually killed a bin Laden body double, and that President Obama and Vice President Biden had the Navy SEALs killed to cover it up. To which very alive SEAL Team 6 member Robert O'Neill responded to with things like, "Hey, we're still alive, and I know who I killed." And this statement: "Very brave men said goodbye to their kids to go kill bin Laden. We were given an order by President Obama. It was not a body double. Thank you, Mr. President." Another very weird thing, to us at least, about this whole situation is that it's kind of gone under the radar. Outside of a couple headlines and shocked Twitter reactions, there's been very little talk about the president accusing his political opponent of killing US soldiers who are very much alive, which is probably a sign that basically nothing on the president's Twitter surprises much of anybody at this point. Early voting has already begun for several states, with Georgia and Texas getting off to rough starts this week. Record high turnout caused long lines at several polling places in both states. Newsy's Shira Tarlow takes a look at stories you need to know from polling places across America.
This year, for the first time, you can vote early in person.
Kansas, Rhode Island, and Tennessee kicked off early voting on Wednesday, with some voters facing issues that have become familiar this election cycle: long lines.
Take a look at this line behind me. It starts and ends behind us and wraps around about 10 parked cars.
Most states offer early in-person voting, but rules to do so vary nationwide. Some start as early as 55 days before Election Day or as late as the Friday before. And more voters than ever are expected to take advantage of it this year. Already, nearly 14 million ballots have been cast, equal to roughly 10% of the total votes counted in the 2016 general election. Experts say the voting pace is remarkable, with voters in 10 states already surpassing 20% of their 2016 total. But the option, meant to reduce long lines and crowds on Election Day, as well as pressure on the Postal Service, has become complicated by the pandemic, with many voters saying making a plan is important to avoid pitfalls.
Just plan ahead, make sure that you realize that the lines may be a little bit longer, but that sticking it out is totally worth it.
Ben Yoder and his friends voted early last weekend. He says turning voting into a social activity is an effective way to make your voice heard while boosting turnout.
My group of friends decided to make a morning of it. I think spending time with your friends while you're waiting is a great way to pass the time. And then you can get your civic duty done and feel good about it.
Others, of course, don't have the luxury of that much time.
I feel honored, and with everything going on today, I felt especially motivated to get out here and stand in whatever length of line I have to be in.
Shira Tarlow, Newsy, Washington.
Free idea: an app that tracks food trucks near your polling locations. Eh?
There's 3 American girls competing for the top 2 Olympic spots.
I could go into this and come out with nothing.
Here's a sad but maybe unsurprising stat. A Newsy Ipsos survey found that 54% of Americans say they feel lonelier since this whole pandemic began. And that feeling of isolation is especially tough for people dealing with addiction, a disease that can get more difficult to deal with as you spend more time alone. Newsy's virology series has been breaking down the pandemic since day one, and in this installment, Newsy's Cody LeGros spent some time with the Addiction Policy Forum to learn more about how people are coping in this unprecedented time.
Across the country, there's another disease growing alongside coronavirus: addiction.
The coronavirus pandemic now creating challenges for people who are dealing with depression and isolation and addiction as well.
Health officials saying overdose rates are on the rise across the state.
These are the things we don't think about. I mean, the overdose rate has tripled.
And lawmakers are starting to notice.
In-person support meetings are canceled. Treatment clinics and counselors are curtailing appointments.
With barriers looming larger, solutions to substance use have now gone digital.
Addiction is a very isolating disease, and it wants us to be alone.
We're seeing higher rates of alcohol and drug use as folks struggle with ways to cope with the fears and the isolation around the pandemic.
Jessica Holsey founded the Addiction Policy Forum, an organization dedicated to ending the stigma and translating the science around addiction.
I lost my parents to heroin use disorder, so this has been my life's work to improve how we respond to addiction. I think sharing our stories and being honest about our own personal struggles, as well as our family struggle with this disease, helps to bring this out of the shadows.
Out of the shadows and into cyberspace, the Addiction Policy Forum invited us to a newly formed recovery meeting via Zoom for people in quarantine. The meeting is a judgment-free zone designed to restore the hope that someone could start or stay in the recovery process while in isolation. The rules: raise your hand to speak, and what happens at recovery meetings stays at recovery meetings. Everyone you're about to meet agreed to be filmed, is in recovery for some type of addiction, and works for the Addiction Policy Forum.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Connections Recovery meeting. I'm a counselor at Addiction Policy Forum Helpline and the Connections app.
My name is Jay Ruet. I'm a person in long-term recovery myself. I just celebrated 10 years in recovery in March.
Hi, I'm Kayla. I am from outside Chicago, and I am also in recovery. God willing, in June, I'll have 6 years. So that's super, super exciting.
No topic is off limits, from evolving support systems.
Certainly for me, the absence of having a meeting to go to is challenging. I think one thing that you find, as these others, as Kayla and Sue can attest to, is that you really develop a special bond with the people that you're sharing such intimate knowledge and details with about your past.
To fears.
This whole situation brought up a crap load of fear. If I'm in that fear, then it can bring me to that dark place where I'm I just want relief. And what do I get relief from? Drugs and alcohol.
And turning past triggers into today's triumphs.
For me, it can just pull as, I'm a little bored. I haven't smoked cigarettes in 11 years. You know what? I'll be like, I want to stir something up. I'm a little bored. Maybe I'll go get some cigarettes. Oh my God, where did that come from?
What's that old saying that the most dangerous part of your body is that 6 inches from your neck up? You got to get out of your own head sometimes.
The Addiction Policy Forum points to several resources ranging on one's access. Need to talk to other people who get it? Join a Zoom meeting. No Wi-Fi? Call them. Don't feel like talking? Try texting via their Connections app, which can also point people to other resources like educational videos, therapy, or getting medicine like naloxone. The organization wants the millions who are struggling to know that self-isolation should not mean a lack of support. And talking about your struggle does not have to feel scary. If there is one thing you could tell yourself pre-recovery, what would it be?
Would I listen?
You're forced to listen to it. I don't know if you have to act on it, but you got to listen to it.
All right, well, yeah, go there, do that.
There should not be any stigma to relapsing. There should not be a stigma to the bumps in the road that you're inevitably going to hit, but just continue sticking with it. As cliche and trite as that sounds, keep sticking with it.
I would tell myself not to hate myself so much, because I know definitely in my addiction, I hated the person I was. And so really trying to encourage myself to love myself and know that just because I make mistakes doesn't mean I am a mistake.
We're not going to make light of loneliness or isolation or any struggle stemming from either, but for real, if you want to rap about the news or anything else, hit us up using the hashtag Newsy in the Loop. I have a lot of reserve energy from not talking to my coworkers. Americans are thinking more about death this year, and it's not hard to see why. For one, we've been keeping a periodical count of deaths from COVID-19 as a way to measure the scope of how devastating this virus has been. For many people, the virus has created a heightened awareness around the end of life. Natural burials were already gaining popularity before the pandemic, but this year that practice has grown in popularity. National reporter Chris Conti profiles a Tennessee man who helps care for the land where some of these burials have taken place.
Do not be fooled by the sound of his ATV.
preserve is open for hiking only.
It is the silence that John Christian Pfeiffer loves the most. 120 acres that still belong to nature. John Christian is their caretaker.
Nature speaks, and you can hear it now in the trees, in the wind.
But in these rolling Tennessee hills, if you look close enough, you can see that it's not just the land John Christian is caring for.
You look at nature and you see them.
There are 50 people buried throughout Taylor Hollow, natural burials. Their graves are marked by simple stones, no expensive caskets. Many were wrapped in quilts or buried in beds of wildflowers.
This is the veteran's funeral from just a few days ago, actually.
A simplistic way to say goodbye that in recent months is gaining new attention.
Well, I think with COVID, one of the things that everybody has done is they've started thinking about making a plan.
Here in Taylor Hollow, they've buried 15 people this year. One of the deaths was COVID-related. The pandemic has led to a sudden increase in the number of people looking at natural burial options.
I think that COVID has heightened folks' awareness of how important it is to make a plan.
Natural burials are also giving families a way to grieve and mourn safely outside during COVID.
Families can still have a gathering. Families can come together with their loved one.
There is also a cost aspect driving the increased rise in natural burials. As American families struggle financially, natural burials offer an end-of-life option that's around $4,000, much less than the traditional burial, which runs around $12,000.
Gosh, it's beautiful out here today.
There's also an environmental draw to the natural burial. Every year, Americans bury approximately 73,000 kilometers of hardwood boards, 58,500 tons of steel, and 1.5 million tons of concrete.
It's not going to be for everyone, and that's okay. We're just another option in the toolbox that we have in working through our end-of-life processes and grief.
And while planning for the end is never easy,
I have families that come and they say, I saw Vicky and the butterflies.
John Christian sees this as one place people can start.
And it doesn't have to be focused on death. It's focused on life and living. I mean, look around us. This place is alive.
In Gallatin, Tennessee, I'm Chris Conti.
That's it for us, gang. As always, thanks for watching. We'll be back with more in the loop tomorrow. Same time, same place. Top stories from Newsy are headed your way right now.